when our kids don't feel like we see them for who they are or accept them for who they are, we run the risk of them feeling unsafe. And that unsafety can actually shut down their capacity to learn the very thing we want them to learn to be able to manage.
You're listening to Parenting with Impact, the podcast for parents like you, raising complex kids to become capable, independent adults, even in this complicated world. Each episode brings expert insights and real-life strategies to help you parent with confidence, calm, and clarity. Here are your hosts, Elaine and Diane.
Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. Diane and Elaine here today, and 'tis the season. We're going to talk about reactivity. Right?
This is season. We're not sure whether we're going to talk about like being together with your family on the holidays, because we're recording this kind of in preparation for a release during holidays in 2025, or whether we were just going to end up talking about reactivity, because I think both of us had conversations with people this week that had just been about really reactive kids or teens or parents or whatever. So that's kind of where this came up.
Well, and I just got back from a coaching conference. So there's all kinds of stuff in my mind bouncing around about, creating belonging and safety and all kinds of fun stuff. So we're going to kick it off with reactivity and how that shows up, and then see where it goes.
It's funny because even if you just said that, Elaine, one of the things I think I want to start with is kind of our perspective as humans to reactivity, right? It's this sort of, I think that there's this idea, especially those of us who were raised in a certain generation, that there was just some special magical button we can press on ourselves, or we can get the other human to press, that makes it so that they don't react. And I'm saying that specifically because I think that there's an oversimplification that happens. And I think that the more we've learned about brain science and the more stressful our environment has become, the more we recognize that it's not about willpower. That's it. It's like we used to talk about ADHD as being about willpower. I think we used to talk about reactivity as being about willpower. And the more we learn about the brain and the body, it's not actually that. And so that's kind of where I want to enter in. What's your backstory on this one?
So I grew up in a home where reactivity was kind of not allowed, right? You weren't, if there was any emotion at all, it wasn't a rational discussion, and there was no rational discussion happening. And the only thing that was valued was rational discussion.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think we've come a long way since then. And really what I think I hear you saying is that we really need to look at what is our relationship with like all kinds of emotions.
Yeah.
And when those emotions are in reaction to something else, right? Ultimately, that's what reactivity is, right? So let's say, what is reactivity? When we express an emotion or react to an emotion, I would say, maybe not intentionally or thoughtfully or consciously, but when we do it unconsciously from a place of an emotion that may be.
So is that an unconscious response to an emotion? Typically, that happens very quickly. This is like, I've heard people say that it's like it takes you over kind of thing. And one of the pieces that I think we have to start with is that reactivity looks different in everybody, right? It's this sort of reactivity. What the acronym we use is SOTA. What is SOTA?
Yeah. Right. Okay. But before we go into SOTA, just really quickly, because this just in,
right?
We're talking about it as if it's absolutely automatically a negative thing. But sometimes people have really positive reactions to things, right? You get a birthday party, surprise, you're going to have a reaction to it. Somebody gives you a gift or shows up and you're excited to see them. You see somebody you haven't seen in a long time at a place you don't expect to see them, and you kind of react to that.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that that's a nice way into it, because it's this sort of, you're right, we do have this idea that it's negative. But what I want to take away from what you just said is that there's this automatic piece of it, right? It's this sort of, we always say that if we want to be thoughtful in our responses, we want to pause and then respond. And what we're describing is something that happens not in the brain, but in the body, in the heart, in the body mechanics, and the emotions, and that we may not even have time to think about it before it's on us. And that's why we call it a
In
reaction.
the brain, but it's not a ready, aim, fire. It's a fire.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, right. And so sometimes that can be really positive, and we can really enjoy that. Sometimes we get beautiful surprises at different times of the year, and that's lovely. If you like surprises, and
If
it's
you like surprises, yeah.
right?
Well, and I think that the piece that is coming up for me, we're going to end up just like bumping around in this conversation, I can already tell, which is great. The relationship between being a neurospicy human
Mhm.
and being emotions. So your emotions might be quicker to respond. They might be more heightened. They might be, so you might be more sensitive. You might be less sensitive. But so there's going to be a amplification that happens, whether it's because your kid has ADHD or with anxiety or depression or anything. You're going to have some of that underneath it.
Yeah. I used to say in my house, the highs were higher and the lows were lower,
Mhm.
right? And there was a lot less in between. And I think we see that in families with neurodiversity, where there's sometimes a lot of reactivity, sometimes a fair amount of intensity, right? Okay, so now I'm ready if you are to go into how does
Soda?
it show up.
How does it show up?
When it's a reaction that we may not find favorable in our families, it can show up in what we call soda, right? What's soda?
Oh, I thought you were going to explain it. You know
I
the
can.
acronym.
Yeah.
I do. Do it.
Okay. So soda is an acronym. Um, the stands for shut down, right? So sometimes people react by shutting down. The O is go on the offense, the D is defense, and the A is avoid. So let me put it out there first.
Yeah, and it's kind of like fight or flight, right? So the S and the A are flight, and the O and the D are fight, right? So either I'm defensive or offensive, and that's the way I'm fighting, or I'm shutting down or I'm avoiding, and that's my flight. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. So or maybe freeze. Shutdown could be freeze.
Freeze could be freeze. Yeah.
But so does, I think, a helpful lens that we can use when we see behaviors, and sometimes we don't realize that our kids are being reactive because they're not yelling or fighting or screaming or slamming doors, which
They're blaming or they're hiding in their room, which doesn't quite feel the same and could still be a reaction.
right.
I was just thinking about the defense, right? It's just sort of the blame game. And we could do a whole podcast on the blame game. But parents all the time are like, my kid won't take responsibility for what's going on. And to me, that's the great indication that this kid is escalated. This kid is in a reactive response. And yes, there requires a level of maturity to take responsibility. We're not kind of talking about that piece of it. But if you notice your kid blaming everybody else, the teacher, the dog ate my homework, whatever it is, there's some possibility that that's because they're in the D of soda in the reactive.
And the blame game also happens in offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because the teacher didn't prepare me. It's because you didn't remind me. It's because you didn't get me up, right? There's both offense and defense can lead into that blaming game.
Yeah.
And the blame is because it's really hard to feel like or want or be able to take responsibility myself. So if somebody else is responsible, then I'm not wrong, I'm not bad, right? And there's a conflating for a lot of our kids of wrong equals bad, which is probably another conversation as well. Maybe not. Maybe it is this conversation.
Well, do we want to take a break and then come back?
Yeah,
And figure out where we're going to go?
Yeah, well, actually, before we do that, one thing, because what I want to cue up is what I just said really hit something for me, is that notion that wrong equals bad, right? Makes a lot of our kids and sometimes us or our spouses or our partners feel like it's not safe to be ourselves. And so I want to come back and talk a little bit about safety. Can we do that?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
Do you recognize current ADHD interventions fall short? At Dig Coaching, we have developed a new field of engineering and a new ADHD intervention called cognitive ergonomics from the inside out. To learn more, go to digcoaching.com/impact.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's Elaine and Diane, and we are talking about reactivity. We've been talking about emotional intensity and soda and that tendency, whether it's a positive reaction or a negative reaction, but really we're kind of moving into what happens when we have reactions in the home that aren't serving the family dynamic, right?
Well, and part of where I want to go, because you were talking about this before the break, is wrong equals bad, right? Or I don't remember what the language was that you used, but there's so much to this that is automatic, right? And we don't want to make that an excuse necessarily. We can talk a bit about kind of what to do about it. But if we see reactivity as something that somebody's doing on purpose or that they can somehow control, we're going to handle it very differently than if we go, okay, wait, this person is having something going on in their brain and their body that is more automatic. And so how do you accommodate rather than, so there's two parts. It's like, what's going on, which is where you were going to talk about the safety piece of it. And then there's the how do you accommodate it piece. So let's talk about, you want to start with the safety?
Yeah. I mean, and part of, as we were talking about, what do we want to talk about today? I mentioned I just came back from this conference, from a coaching conference, and it was kind of striking to me, Diane, how many of the presentations I went to and the conversations I attended were talking about how essential safety is for creating a sense of belonging and for people to be available, specifically available for growth. That was the particular place that there was a lot of focus because it was coaching. And this notion, and I at some point I captured in my notes, like, is this what's going on with our kids? Because when our kids don't feel like we see them for who they are or accept them for who they are, even if they're not performing at a certain level, whether that's academic performance or, making their bed or, getting along with their sibling, if they don't feel like we allow them to be who they are, then we run the risk of them feeling unsafe, and that unsafety can actually shut down their capacity to learn the very thing we want them to learn to be able to manage. It's like,
Well, and what's coming up for me is you're saying that it's kind of like two different things. One is that it's hard because as parents, we work so hard to create safety. And you were talking earlier about a parent who really wanted to make some change and to send a message that the relationship was more important than the grades. I'm shortcutting the conversation, but it's a sort of, and if you've had years in most instances of our kids feeling like, every time we have a conversation, it's about all the things that I've done wrong, or every time we have a conversation, it's about one more thing that I'm supposed to do. We get into this there's a neuroplasticity that's created in our kids that they feel like no matter what we say, they're hearing that as judgment. Oh, here I've done something wrong. Here I've done something again. And the other piece of it is it's also their own safety, right? So the other piece we're fighting is that they think that they're broken, right? So I'm creating this story. I'm broken. I should be able to do this. I don't understand why my brain doesn't work the way all my friends do. And so there becomes this, I'm not even creating a safe space for myself because I'm constantly judging or beating myself up because I'm not meeting what I see as my potential.
Yeah. No, I think that's very true. And either way, whether it's external or internal, or whether we're kind of taking other people's reactions or behaviors and then making up stories about what that means for us, the bottom line, and I think this is what I really hope parents will take away from this, no matter what, is when any human, and that means us as parents or our kids, when we don't feel like it's okay to be who we are, when we have to mask who we are, when it doesn't feel like being who I am is safe or is going to be met with respect. One of the presenters I went to hear wrote a book on neurodiversity and coaching, and she was talking a lot about dignity and how important it is for us to create environments that are dignified and inclusive and flexible. But that language of dignity around being who I am and letting that be okay and not having to morph or change or fit into someone else's box is something I think a lot of our kids struggle with. And I don't think we intend to have them feel like they can't be themselves, but that's the result of being in a school system where they're constantly being expected to be in somebody's box.
Well,
right?
and it's interesting because I think that word safety, where we started, I think it feels like just even in my nervous system, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not creating a safe space for my child. There's this sort of layer of look that goes along with that word safety. Yet it's really true because the nervous system doesn't feel safety. If we can move it to something more like dignity or respect or ease, even like my nervous system doesn't feel at ease is very different than my nervous system doesn't feel safe. And maybe that could be helpful as we're looking at this, because that word safe does have this charge to it. And technically, that's actually what's going on in the brain and the body. The body sees what's going on as a threat, whether it's a legitimate threat or whether it's a theoretical threat. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
The brain
matter.
and the body see it as a threat. I remember when I learned this the first time, it's like the brain and the body sees a missing assignment the same way that it sees a mountain lion chasing them. I mean, it's just like literally, it's a flash on or a flash off. And it's just, this is a threat to me.
Yeah. So I just found something in my notes, and you're going to love this. So one of the things she talked about is a woman named Ludmila Preslova. One of the things she talks about was that's like sensitivity in itself is not the problem. It's the toxicity around it that's the problem. She talked about people with neurodiversity as being canaries in the coal mine, and that we experience these feelings more intensely, often more quickly. And it's really important because the world needs people who feel this way and experience the world this way. But we have to create an environment where they don't feel like they have to mask harder. We want to create a way for them to play to their strengths. And so I just thought that was really powerful, that notion that it's not don't do this or don't react or don't feel this way. It's how do we create a space for you to feel safe feeling this way?
Right. Well, I think that's really where I feel like we need to go with the time we have left. Is like I think that, to bottom line, we get that this is automatic. It has lots of different flavors. What's going on underneath it is the brain and the bodies has a sense of ill ease or threat or not feeling safe. And so I think that first important thing is to recognize when you have a reactive kid, whatever flavor it is, or if you're in a place of reactive, there's this need to normalize it. And I think that that's the piece of it, that to start with, this happens to literally everybody on the planet. It looks different to everybody on the planet, but this is what's happening in the brain and the body. So that's the place to start. And then the second place is, what do we do about that? What's important to focus?
So, and that's what's coming up for me one is to recognize that this creates a sense of stress in the body if we're constantly in reactive mode. And so, we talk about this a lot in our programs in Insanity School and the anatomy of the trigger. And like, we spend a lot of focus talking about how do you handle feeling stressed, because chronic stress is eventually going to lead to burnout, whether it's with us as parents or with teachers or with our kids. We can actually do something about that when we recognize it and we intervene. The tool that she taught that I thought was so cool is she said, we got to stop talking about the golden rule, do unto others as we would have them do unto us. And she introduced the notion of the platinum rule, which was treat others how they want to be treated. And I really love that notion that one of the things we do about it is we tune into what someone else's experience is. If our kid's slamming a door or avoiding or shutting down or any of those sodas, what are they seeking? How do they want to be engaged with? How do they want to be treated?
And when you say that immediately, it's like this sort of, we want our kids to tell us what to do. So it's like, okay, we get it, but it's like, so when you slam the door, what am I supposed to do? And then their kid is going to say, well, I don't know.
Right.
So,
But I know it's an invitation.
right.
So.
So the time to talk about what they need is not when they're slamming the door or they're reacting or they're in the middle of soda. So that's the other piece we need to start with is this sort of the conversations about reactivity happen in the moment that you're not reactive. And what you were saying earlier that I think is important to highlight, these kids are walking around at a stress level of a 6 or a 7. They don't have a lot of moments where their nervous system is calm. And
Yeah.
so that could be part of what the toolbox is as well. Is I was talking about this on a group the other day. It's the sort of if you find a moment every day where everybody's nervous system gets down to maybe a 2 or a 3, maybe it's sitting on the in bed cuddling before you go to sleep. Maybe it's rubbing somebody's feet. Maybe it's just, oh,
Finding something to laugh at, right?
let's just enjoy the dinner because it tastes so good. It's just sort of, what are the things that you can do to just kind of relish in a calm moment? And finding that even once or twice a day, maybe it's when you start, if it's you, I'm going to encourage you to try to do it when you start your day and when you end your day. It'll help you sleep better, honestly, if you can do something at the end of the day, even if it's just like giving yourself a hug or rubbing your arms or doing some deep breaths and some exhales and letting go of the day. Teaching our kids that part of what they need is moments of down regulation is an important part of the toolbox.
And ultimately, like we want to be able to be that person to go co-regulate for our kids, to help be the one that helps them down-regulate. I was watching some movie on the plane coming back from this conference, and it had nothing to do with the movie, but there's this one scene where this young adult is kind of hyperventilating and having a panic attack, and she pulls over, and the guy comes up to the window and starts yelling at her, and then he realizes she's having a panic attack, and I started crying. Really, because he immediately goes, "Oh, wait a minute, you're okay. There's nothing wrong. My son used to have these." And this complete stranger starts breathing with her and helping her reclaim and calm down and down-regulate. And he does this 5, 4, 3, 2, like he does the whole thing because his son had panic
Oh, that's
attacks.
so cool.
It was beautiful.
Yeah,
And
if every police officer did that when they pulled
that's
you
the
over,
listen.
before I tell you what you did wrong, let's down-regulate.
Down-regulate. See them sitting and eating a sandwich and whatever. It was just, but I was literally crying because what he did was so beautiful because he saw that she was stressed. And instead of saying, "You can't turn here, you can't park here," he went, "Oh, you're struggling. Let me help you calm down first, and then we can talk."
Well, and as parents, I mean, so often I know. And we talk about the hot mess because somebody gets reactive and then we get reactive and then they get reactive and like escalating. And it requires somebody like breaking that cycle and being able to go, "Oh, wait, let me not react to their reaction. Let me co-regulate." Right. And so it requires, and the thing that I always say is like, whoever can be the grown up in the room gets to be the grown up. Right. And so sometimes it's a kid who will say, "Mommy, let's like, everybody's upset. Let's calm down." Like, hopefully it's mommy or daddy that's saying, "Hey, everybody's upset. Let's calm down. Let's take a minute. Let's take a beat." But it's that sort of, again, we've got to figure out how to not get ourselves worked up in order to be there for them when they're reacting.
Well, and to recognize that their behaviors are often reactions.
Yes.
Right. Their behaviors are often autonomic responses, reactions, and they need support in down-regulating, and that's not the moment to try to logic them out of it.
Right. And I think that that's the piece of it is that I always think about it as, something. I try to think of reactivity in the same breath. It's something that just happens automatically in a body. And I don't want to oversimplify seizures, but that's the first thing that kind of pops in my mind. It's like, if you've got a human that's in the midst of a seizure, you're going to respond very differently. And if you can see that this is a human in the middle of a reactive space, it's this sort of, okay, wait, what does this human need? Almost in that same sort of way. And I don't want to oversimplify what happens when a human has a seizure, but I think it's helpful.
Well, it is. And I'm going to tell a story on myself because David and I were dealing with this tech thing this morning and both of us kind of lost it. And I tried to do this by saying, okay, it feels like we both need to just take a breath and down-regulate. telling someone to calm down does not help them calm down. And I am very guilty of having tried that this morning. And so I had to stop talking and I had to just kind of be that down-regulating without trying to verbalize it, so that we could both kind of reclaim and come back to dealing with it. Because it wasn't a big deal, but we were both triggered by it, right?
Well, and what you're speaking to is that there may need to be some experimentation. But I think that that's part of the important part of what we want to get out here is that this is something to work on as a family. This is something to create a space so that it becomes normalized. And it might require trying a few different things. I remember when my kids were little, if, they'd storm off to their room and slam the door, one of them wanted me to follow them and the other one absolutely didn't want me to follow them. And so I had to remember, okay, wait, which kid is this? Okay, no, I'm going to just sit outside their door and wait for them, or I'm going to knock quietly and I'm going to go in and give them a hug, right? It's just sort of knowing what the medicine is that they most need, and even if they can't articulate it, trying different things. And above all, managing your own reactivity in the midst of it feels what's important here.
The bottom line, I think, that I'm taking away is, you said something a little while ago, is this is a family affair, right? We're all dealing with this. We're all human. We all have different thresholds of reactivity. But to normalize that reactivity happens and to own when we do, so that even if you're not a major reactor, right? Even if you're not a major yeller, to own it so that it's normalized that this is human and this is something we humans all have to learn to manage, instead of they're the ones with the behavior and we expect them to figure it out. So that's the role we can play in this. We talk a lot about making it okay to make mistakes, right? So this is making it okay to have emotions. I wrote a piece years ago about how emotions need their time on the surface. The question is how they show up on the surface. And sometimes we might need to massage that a little bit.
Awesome. So I've got I don't know if y'all can hear this, but I've got a really reactive dog listening to us talk about reactivity. So let's wrap up the podcast so I can go help him co-regulate.
There you go. All right. So everybody take a minute. Think about what you're thinking about during this conversation while Diane and I have been talking and exploring and ideating and, come up with some challenges and some resolutions. Like, what had your attention? And what's an insight for you? What are you taking away from this conversation?
And as always, thanks for what you're doing for yourself and for your kids. At the end of the day, you really do make a difference.
Great week, everybody.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.